The function of supervision has us examine many of the different functions that occur. And it also gives us various questions and issues that we need to discuss. The questions include asking, whose interest does supervision really work with? Confusion also comes about concerning the notions such as mentoring or practice, teaching, and also clinical supervision. I'm going to talk a little bit about Alfred Kadushin's model of supervision and some of the insights that it brings to some of these questions. So the immediate roots of what we have come to know as supervision is in the human services, like in the development of social work and casework. We see this, for example, in the concern for the needs of clients and taking up of ideas and practices that we owe much to the emergence of psychoanalysis. However, to make sense of supervision, it's necessary to look at the various forms of the internship that have existed in different societies. Supervision can be found in the growth of charitable social agencies in Europe and North America during the 19th century. It involved the recruitment, organization, and oversight of a large number of volunteers and later paid workers. So the volunteers were commonly known as visitors. I'm sure you remember from your social work history, you had the friendly visitors that their task was to call on a small number of families to offer advice and support. The main concern was to foster self-help and adoption of some healthy habits and behaviors for those families. In other words, the decision had to be made as to whether they were deserving of the particular services. In the early forms, and especially in the work of the Charity Organization Society, the present function and approaches of supervision were signaled as thinking and practice around casework became more sophisticated, especially through the work of pioneers such as Mary Richmond, and the demands for more paid workers grew, so supervision became more of an identified process. And Kadushin's model of supervision has three particular factors. One is administrative, the promotion and maintenance of good standards of work, coordination of practice with policies and administration, the assurance of an efficient and smooth running office as well. The second one is educational, the educational development of each individual worker on the staff in a manner calculated to evoke their full, to revoke, I'm sorry, let me start over. The educational development of each individual worker on the staff in a manner calculated to evoke her fully to realize her possibilities of usefulness. And then the thirdly is supportive. It is the maintenance of harmonious working relationships that cultivate a spirit of core. This is Kadushin's rendering of Dawson in 1920. But in a short step to translate these concerns into current language of learning organizations, it essentially says that the managerial aspects of managers' work is a responsibility for monitoring and improving the work of others. So their managerial effectiveness is determined by their capacity to improve the work of others. If managers are not able to make this contribution, then what value are they adding? I want to concentrate on how managers approach supervision. So first of all, in my experience of management, some of us will have found that all those three elements are present and were acknowledged by the parties involved. As managers, we may well express a concern for the well-being of those we are responsible for. And I could say, as being a manager also, having been a manager, that we always want to look for the best fit for a particular person. When you have to delegate tasks, you want to know how well organized that person is, what their persona is like, what tasks that they can do best, and then appropriately delegate that information to them or that task to them. There also may be situations where elements are not all present. For example, we've slipped into a strong task orientation with a particular worker, or this is quite common, we may focus rather too strongly on the support side. So in voluntary and not-for-profit organizations, it's not uncommon to find that staff require a good deal of working with in some staff. Of course, you do have different levels of staff. You have some levels of staff that are very experienced and need less coaching or less supervision. And then you have interns like yourselves who will need a lot more attention. Kadushin also discusses that it is a responsibility not to lose touch with the rationale of the agency. So even in supervision, I know how I used to do it. Whenever there were new policies or new rules that came down, we discussed that in either supervision or a group supervision that we would have. In the education focus of supervision, the primary problem is worker ignorance and ineptitude regarding the knowledge, attitudes, and skills required to do the job. So the primary goal is to dispel that ignorance and upgrade the skill. And that's Kadushin's wording. It says that the supervisees may be helped to understand the client better, become more aware of their own reactions and responses to the client, understand the dynamics of how they and their client are interacting, look how they intervene and the consequences of their interventions, and explore other ways of working with the client or other similar situations. So you should be using your time with your supervisor in that educational mode to learn how to better understand your client, how you might better interact with that client. Also, as a support, in supportive supervision, the primary idea is that worker morale and job satisfaction is met. The primary goal is to improve morale and job satisfaction with workers. Now, sometimes workers are seen as facing a variety of job-related stresses, as well as your personal related stresses that you may have, and that could seriously affect your work and lead to less than satisfactory service to clients. It could also lead to quick burnout for the worker as well. Now, there are some issues that we might have to address. And first, the way that the functions of the supervisor are depicted tends towards seeing supervisees as a deficit. And that can be a problem, especially if your supervisor continues to see as that and doesn't really give you anything to build you up or to give you positive feedback on some of the things that you're doing well. So just like we talk about in social work, that we have to look at social work and empower the people that we're trying to work with, such as supervisors should be empowering you. Also, it's sometimes a little fuzzy notion such as support. You know, what really is support? People who don't feel like that they get positive feedback from their supervisors will ultimately say, I never got support from that supervisor. And so you have to sometimes define what support means for you and let your supervisor be aware of that. There's also the notion that there could be issues around naming the separate functions. For instance, is it helpful to separate administration from management? Would management be a better overall title, and so on? Fourth, there's also a question of how tied the model is to managerial supervision. But even given the questions, Kadushin framework still remains helpful. So just kind of putting all of those functions together, the primary focus of supervision then should be to provide a regular space for the supervisor to reflect upon their content and process of their work. 2, to develop understanding and skills within the work. 3, to receive information and another perspective concerning one's work. 4, to receive both content and process feedback. When you do, in this course, we will be doing process recordings, and that's something you will work on your own with interviewing clients, but as well as share that information with your supervisors before submitting it into the course room. And you will also be ensuring that the person, as a worker, one is not left to carry unnecessary difficulties, problems, and projections alone. So you should always have support through your supervisor when you are having some difficulty in addressing a particular situation with clients. 7 is to have space to explore and express personal distress, rest, and any kind of transference or countertransference. I know in my supervisory meetings, sometimes at the end of our group meetings, I would have a wine and cheese, WHINE. And what we used that for was just for people to get things off their chest. And it was successful, I think, so people went back to work and they felt that they were heard. To plan and utilize their personal and professional resources better is number 8. Also to be proactive rather than reactive. That's an administrative task. And to ensure the quality of work. Again, that's administrative as well as supportive. So if you have any other questions about this, please post it on Blackboard. Thank you.